Welcome to the May 2019 edition of City Connection. This is the live television program where you, the citizens of Grand Rapids, can ask your mayor about local issues. So joining me on City Connection each month is Mayor Rosalind Bliss, and we come together to offer the community this opportunity to hear about local efforts from City Hall and beyond, and also provide you the opportunity for your questions and comments. We do that later in the show. Today we'll be welcoming into the studio as well new Assistant City Manager Doug Matthews and Director of Communications Amy Snow Buckner. Both give direction to the city's communication strategies, but also have numerous other areas of responsibility. And we'll learn more when Mayor Bliss interviews the two about their roles with the city. Your opportunity to take part in the live conversation comes in the second half of the hour. You can do that by emailing cityconnection@grcmc.org. You can send your tweets to @GRTV Access or commenting on GRTV's Facebook page. We're also live streaming at therapidian.org. City Connection is a live collaboration between the City of Grand Rapids and Grand Rapids Community Media Center, broadcasting live this date, May 6, 2019, here on Community Access Television, Channel 24. Again, live streaming at therapidian.org. All right, we'll be rebroadcasting this throughout the month, but we're here live now, and Mayor Bliss, welcome to the show.
Thank you, thank you. Good to be here, happy May.
I'm glad to have it. Glad to have a little bit of some spring weather. How did your tree planting initiative go? What, a week or so ago? A couple weeks ago?
It was about a week and a half ago. Not this past Saturday, the Saturday before, and it was fantastic. So we had, I think, a little over 400 volunteers that came out, and we started planting trees around 9 a.m. in Roosevelt Park, and then kind of in between Roosevelt Park and Century, which is right up against 131. And within kind of that area, we planted just over 300 trees, really nice sized trees. And so it was a great day. I think we're pretty much finished up by 11:30, and it was good. It was cold. It snowed later that day, but it held off during the tree planting.
That is Michigan. Well, it's nice that it held off for that. Tell a little bit about the overall greening initiative kind of strategy there.
Yeah, so that's part of our larger initiative to try to get to the 40% tree canopy in the city, and that planting event really is one of many that's happening throughout the community. So we have kind of this multi-pronged approach. The Mayor's Greening Initiative, that's something that I do in partnership with Friends of Grand Rapids Parks every year, and so we raise money. It's not taxpayer dollars. It's all supported by donations and volunteers to come out, and it's just a good way to give back to the community. It's a day of service. The Friends of Grand Rapids Parks, they do other volunteer tree plantings throughout the spring and the fall, and they have those listed. And then the city, we have our own forestry department that is out removing dead trees, pruning trees, replanting trees, largely in the right-of-way and in park spaces. And then we're also encouraging folks to plant trees on their private property, knowing that we're not going to be able to get to that 40% tree canopy on our own, and by just planting trees in public space, we really need people to plant trees on their private property. So the night before the tree planting, we gave away over 100 trees to folks and asked them to plant them on their private property. And that was really fun as well. I was there that night on Friday night as we handed out trees and got to talk to a lot of neighbors. And we had some tree experts there that helped folks pick out the right tree for their yard and help them make sure that they planted it right.
Very nice.
Yeah.
On a similar topic, I saw a recent announcement that the city has received a $150,000 grant, and it has to do with Kennesaw Park and Plaster Creek.
Yeah, so we've been very fortunate on the grant front, I should say. So those are two big grants that we received, and we are matching those. So you'll see work being done both in Kennesaw and along Plaster Creek, and that work will hopefully be happening sometime this summer. But we are also doing work in other parks. That's part of the Parks Millage. But then we received another Kaboom Playground grant, so we'll be building another playground in June. And then in partnership with Grand Rapids Public Schools, we received a grant to do more education and get more young people out into nature to learn through nature-based play and education. So that's a 3-year grant, and we're really excited about that too.
There's some significance to Plaster Creek area, and it's had a bit of a history. It used to be quite a notable area in good ways, but it's had a little bit of a a history that has to do with the runoff that ends up there
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
it seems very significant that that's an area to address.
Yeah, we've invested a lot of time and energy in Plaster Creek. In fact, oh, it's probably 2 years ago. I spent a couple days out there doing some cleanup and education with some volunteers through WEMIAC, through West Michigan Environmental Action Council. And then part of the Mayor's River cleanup in September, we always cover the Plaster Creek area as well. And it really is this beautiful space, but you're right, it's been known to have a high level of pollution and toxins. And so we've been spending a lot of time trying to get there and do a lot of work to clean it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to randomly ask you a few
Sure,
things.
sure,
but,
absolutely, lots going on.
There's been some recent, a couple recent crime prevention meetings, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the focus of those, and it's in advance of a proposed ordinance, I believe.
So yes, so it's called SEPTED ordinance, but it's crime prevention through environmental design. And the City Commission, actually, we started talking about this about a year ago when we were getting concerns from neighbors about the changes that occurred at the state level around the Michigan liquor control. So last year, MLCC made some changes, allowing more locations to sell beer and wine, and so we saw this pretty significant uptick in requests from gas stations and dollar stores to start selling alcohol, where before that, there was what was called a half-mile rule where you couldn't have a concentration of places that sold alcohol. Well, that rule went away. And we saw a pretty significant increase in the number of requests. And so neighbors were really concerned, knowing that we have a strong correlation between a spike in crime and liquor stores. And we have good data to show kind of through heat maps that that's the case. And so the community brought forward a number of concerns, and they brought forward a number of ordinances that exist throughout the country looking at crime prevention, particularly for establishments where you have a high incidence of crime. And so through environmental design, you can actually reduce or prevent crime from happening. And we know that, right? Because we know that street lights and certain things in areas prevent or reduce crime.
Whether windows are covered or not, and it might be a little different than somebody would expect. It's almost like that clear vision into a convenience store is safer than having maybe blocked windows.
Yeah, so it does, there's a whole method looking at your design of a building, whether it's, like you said, transparency through the windows, certain lighting, really making sure that you don't have these kind of dark spots, especially where people are parking. And so that ordinance language was drafted about 3 or 4 months ago. Planning Commission reviewed it, Planning Department has been working on it. We had some community meetings about it, and I anticipate it'll come back before the full commission for consideration, probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, next random topic, and maybe you'll get into this with Assistant City Manager Doug Matthews, but 4-year strategic plan was just presented. Tell a little bit about the city's 4-year plan.
Yeah, so the City Commission, it was led by and really advocated. So when the city manager was first hired last year in October, one of the first things he asked was, where is our city's strategic plan? And the city didn't have one, and actually had never had one. And we had this transformation plan, and we had this sustainability plan that had hundreds and hundreds of items in it. And so he brought together a team internally. He actually worked with Plant Moran, and then worked with the City Commission over the course of 4 months. We met multiple times, and we started to identify, okay, what's our vision, what's our mission, what's our goals, and through that process, we created this, I think, very clear, concise, thoughtful, and bold strategic plan. You can find it on our website. It's pretty easy to find, and what you'll find is that the strategic plan has 6 pillars, and then under each pillar there are a number of goals and objectives, and then there are specific metrics that we'll be using to really determine if we're making progress or not. And then we are working with our 311 department to come up with a dashboard where the community will be able to see, where are we today related to our goals, where do we want to be, and then we'll be able to track progress. We also, through the data, will be breaking down all the data demographically by where we can, by race and gender. So that will be incorporated in it as well. So we're excited. So that work finished up last month, and then it really is the foundation for the budget plan that was presented by the city manager a couple weeks ago.
Okay. So brand new city manager Mark Washington, and he is diving in deep.
He is working more than overtime, I would say, since he got here. But what that does too, and we talked about this around the city commission table, is that we are going to archive or kind of put to bed the transformation plan and the sustainability plan. And we'll just have the one strategic plan that will guide us over, as you said, it's a 4-year plan, which is aligned with our budget plan. Our budget is a 5-year plan. It looks out 5 years, and so the strategic plan and the fiscal plan will be aligned.
Okay. Tell a little bit about how that works. You have a 5-year budget plan, but you adopt a budget every year.
Yes. So under city charter, we adopt our fiscal plan every year, and it has to be balanced. That's actually under state law. Mm-hmm. So local units government, we have to pass a balanced budget, unlike some other government. Federal at the federal level, they can pass a deficit budget. We can't do that. Under our form of government, being a city manager, a form of government, the city manager is the one that works on, creates, and presents the fiscal plan to the full city commission for consideration, review, amendments if we want to make amendments, and then full adoption. And so that was presented a couple weeks ago. It's really lengthy. It's well over 300 pages. You can find it on the website. If you are not up to reading all 300 pages, the very first section is a letter from the city manager that captures, I think in a very clear, thoughtful way, through a narrative, all of the core elements of the fiscal plan that's being proposed.
And then a little bit on the timeline for that. You've had a couple workshop level sessions for the city commission, then it'll go before the community for some public input.
Yeah, so we had, over the last couple weeks, we've had budget sessions. We had one last week, we have another one tomorrow. And then there will be a public hearing at our May 14th, at our next city commission meeting in the evening. And then the plan is to adopt it at our last meeting in May. So the schedule this year is a little bit more compressed than it has been in years past. Ever since I've been on the commission for the last 14 years, we adopted the plan in June. But with some internal fiscal changes that were made, we now need to adopt it by the end of May. And so it feels a little compressed, but with all the work we did in the strategic planning process over the last 4 months, I think it really feeds together nicely.
Very nice. We may learn a little bit more about that once we have Assistant City Manager and some communications information from Amy Snow Buckner. So we'll take a break now. We'll welcome back to the studio with Mayor Bliss. It'll be Assistant City Manager Doug Matthews, along with Director of Communications Amy Snow Buckner. We'll be right back.
Are you passionate about empowering youth to live above the influence of negative behavior, substance use, and anything that would derail them from a promising future? Have you been waiting for an opportunity to impact the future generation in a positive way? Well, this announcement's for you. I'm Nadia Kimball, Supports Coordinator with the Kent County Prevention Coalition, or the KCPC. I'm so excited to share an exciting volunteer opportunity with you. You are cordially invited to attend the 8th Annual Above the Influence Kent County Youth Summit. This year's event is scheduled for Friday, May 10, 2019 at the Voss Place Convention Center from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. We're expecting about 1,200 West Michigan youth to attend, so as you can imagine, volunteer power is what we need most. The goal of Youth Summit is to equip youth to drive positive change in our community, while transforming health and wellness trends and overcoming pop culture messages that suggest that alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs aren't harmful. We're looking for volunteers and chaperones that are equally passionate about creating a drug-free Kent County. Our theme for this year's event is Transformers, Influencers Unleashed. Chosen by our Youth Coalition, the Transformers Influencers Unleashed theme speaks to the summit's goal of empowering every attendee to excel individually, lead socially, and revolutionize their families, schools, and community by living above the influence. The KCPC and our coordinating agency, Network 180, organize this event each year as a part of our mission to reduce substance abuse in Kent County, providing a healthier community for everyone. Volunteer and chaperone registration is open now. The deadline to act is Friday, April 4th, so act now. For links to register as an adult, chaperone, volunteer, or student, visit our website.
Welcome back. I am happy to have with me two individuals from the city, one relatively new and one who's been with the city for a number of years now. So new to our city is Mr. Doug Matthews, new to Grand Rapids as well as to the city organization. So Mr. Matthews was recently hired by our city manager as our assistant city manager. So we're going to learn a little bit more about him. And then Amy Snow Buckner joined the city a number of years ago, but more recently was selected as our communications director. So we're going to spend some time talking to both of you, and then we'll answer some questions in the next section. But first, let's just, for folks who don't know either of you, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and your history and experience, and then the role that you play at the city. And it doesn't matter who goes
You're
first.
the new guy. Go.
All right.
Fair enough. I've given this speech a lot lately. I most recently, like the city manager, hail from Austin, Texas. Well, I've been there about 10 years. Prior to that, was in Florida. I do feel like I'm migrating in reverse at this point, coming from the south and just making it further north. Most of my career has been focused around strategic planning, communications, community engagement, innovation, which are some of the things that are, as you were just talking earlier, are core components of the strategic plan. And I feel like one of the things that the city manager has brought me here to do is to organize the parts of the organization that are really managing the cultural levers of the organization to help advance some of the goals that are in the plan, and start talking about how we instill values as part of the leadership structure, and have a common language and common decision-making framework. And all of that is really driven by our community engagement practices, which is one of the conversations that we've been having, is how to better incorporate community engagement as really the foundation of communications, as opposed to kind of a plug-in afterthought of some of the things that we do.
Yeah. And you're going on how long here in the city? Is it?
I was told
7
it was
weeks?
5 weeks.
5 weeks.
6 weeks. I'm not quite sure.
You're having so much fun, you're not keeping track.
That's right. So I've been here since the end of March.
Okay. All right. Well, we're glad to have you.
Appreciate it.
And Ms. Snow Buckner, how about you?
So I have been with the city 3.5 years now. I started in the mayor's office, and then was hired as managing director of communications. So I feel really excited to be in the space. I was an editor at the Grand Rapids Press for almost 14 years, and then I got into nonprofit fundraising and then public relations work. So it's really fun to be back in the space and to be part of what we're trying to do at the city in terms of communications and community engagement. So it's just really exciting to be part of trying to bring all the great things that we're doing as an organization in various pockets, like centralize that, be more strategic, and make sure that we're really engaging our community in what we're up to at the city.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so let's talk about that a little bit. So I think we've talked about this for years. I know it was one of the things we talked to the city manager about shortly after he was hired. How do we make sure that we're communicating well, particularly in the changing climate of media and communication? And so why don't you share a little bit about some of the things that you're already doing, but then also what the community can expect, I'd say, over the next like 6 months or a year.
Yeah, so over the past year, when I was in acting assignment, we really took a look at maximizing social media and our digital imprint. And so we launched a free monthly e-newsletter and asked residents in the wards. We actually do 3 editions, one for the first ward, second ward, and third ward, and really trying to find those ward-specific, neighborhood-specific news that folks want to know about. And so we continue to see more subscribers, which is great. And so if you haven't subscribed, I recommend that folks go on our website. It's really easy. Just type in GR Connect, which is the name of the e-newsletter, and it's a really easy form to fill out. And you can actually sign up for all 3 word editions if you want. I mean, there is some overlap with the stories, but we really try to be intentional and make sure that we're including information that's specific to those wards and neighborhoods. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, yeah, great. Mr. Matthews, anything to add? What are you thinking over the next 6 months or 12 months?
You know, I mentioned the role that the community engagement plays. You know, the dialogue is an important part of effective communication. In order for that to work, both the organization and the community have to have a shared set of expectations and a shared language around what engagement means. And that was something that we were able to build in my previous positions. And that really, I would say that Grand Rapids has quite a head start compared to the other places that I've been. And I think that one of the things I've found is that this community has an enormous amount of social capital that really advances the ball when you start having these conversations. To have groups like WMCAT, to have groups like the Urban Core Collective that are already taking the ball and working in those spaces really shortens the distance to us really jumping on board and being a part of that. So for me, it's working with the organization to establish the framework of how it is that we intend to engage so that we have a consistent playbook that we're working from as an organization, and that the community has consistent expectations of what it is they can expect when we go out and we ask questions about projects or initiatives or expectations, and that we're effectively reporting all of that information back. That's really, for me, the foundation of all of this work. When you relate that back to the strategic plan, one of the things that we have on the horizon is getting back into the business of regularly asking the questions that we want answers to start doing a benchmarked community survey that we can not only see how we're performing, but how we're performing relative to our peers in the country. And doing that same thing for our employees. All of that is part of the matrix of elevating our communications game, because you can't really talk about where we're going until you have a solid foundation, you have a solid knowledge of where it is that you're at. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to start over the next few months.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this at the City Commission table at length, and so we too are eager to have that community survey roll out and have a good sense of where we're doing well and where we need to improve. And really that feedback loop to the people that we serve, I think, is really important. So one thing that we've heard over the years is that sometimes it feels really fragmented, that here we're a large organization, you know, over 1,600 employees and lots of different departments, and sometimes departments take the lead on doing their own community meetings or engagement, and so people may get a notice from the planning department or the mobile GR department or economic development department, and sometimes it doesn't feel very coordinated, or sometimes even the meetings overlap. And so what is the plan to rectify that, where folks can maybe see an overall, I don't know if it's going to be a calendar or how are we going to do a better job at that?
Yeah, so the connected and engaged community, which is one of those 6 pillars that you talked about during your earlier conversation about the strategic plan. That's really creating a playbook, not only for communications, but community engagement, to make sure that as an organization, we know what one another is doing and we're being strategic about it, and we're not asking folks to come to back community engagement meetings or filling out various surveys or just asking for feedback, and really just prioritizing and make sure that we're one city, one voice working together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the one thing that I would add is that the city of Grand Rapids is a very lean organization. And one of the byproducts when you have a very lean organization is everybody gets very focused on getting the things done that are in their lane. What the manager has tried to do by elevating communications and engagement, to elevating equity, to elevating sustainability so that somebody owns that, is to create somebody that can break through some of those boundaries. Yeah. And that really starts by doing an assessment of what your landscape looks like. So where is your talent? What work is currently being done? And then pulling all of those assets together to have a conversation, because there's nobody in the organization that says, you know what, I want to do this as inefficiently as possible. I think everybody in the organization is interested in doing these things. It's just creating the frameworks to be able to empower them to do it. Yeah. And I think that's part of what our team is being established to do.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing we've heard, and this goes back a couple of years as well, is from the community. They have said multiple times, how do we really shift community engagement and make sure that it's authentic community engagement, that we have a process in place where the information is shared and feedback is provided before a decision is made, where people, particularly folks who maybe don't have the means to show up at a commission meeting, or there may be barriers to them, for them to engage. Like, what are some thoughts around that, and maybe how community engagement could look different in the future than maybe how we've done it in the past?
It always comes back to closing the loop. Yeah. Always. And I'd like to say that there's a public agency out there that has mastered it, but there isn't. So it's, when I go back to how do we establish the frameworks inside the organization, that's the first step. Because if the organization isn't aligned, then there's no way for the community to know what it is that they're supposed to expect. So you've got to establish those expectations inside the organization. You have to train people in a common methodology, and then you need to practice, and you need to get out there. You need to work with your community partners that are also doing the work so that they're doing the same thing. And then you've got to have both the physical and technical resources in the organization to be able to take all that feedback and organize it in a way that you can actually take action. Yeah. That's where almost every engagement practice tends to fall short. And that's one of the things that we're going to have to figure out in the medium term. You know, the short term is establish the frameworks, train the organization, and work with the community organizations.
That's a good place to wrap up this section before we go to Q&A. But before we close this, remind folks again where they can go to sign up for GR Connect.
So grcity.us
is
your one-stop shop for pretty much anything you need to do with the city.
Perfect. And just plug into the search GR Connect, and then you can decide what ward you want to sign up for.
Correct.
Great, thank you. And that's a great resource. I strongly encourage, I'm on all three, I get all three every month, and it's a great way to stay informed. So with that, we'll take a break, and then we'll join Linda again for Q&A. Thank you.
Frederick Meijer Gardens and Sculpture Park is thrilled to announce our 2019 lineup for the Fifth Third Bank Summer Concerts at Meijer Gardens. Beginning on June 6th with NACO and Medicine for the People, concerts run this year through September 18th when we end the season with Calexico and Iron and Wine. Other highlights this year include OAR on June 26th, Amos Lee on July 25, Dawes and Margot Price on July 31, Cake on August 7th, Sarah McLaughlin with Orchestra on August 8th, The Stray Cats on August 15th, and Tosh Sultana on September 8th. View the complete lineup and purchase tickets at meiergardens.org or at startickets.com. Ticket sales begin for members of Meijer Gardens on Saturday, April 27th, and for the general public on May 11th. New this year is a completely renovated concessions building and amphitheater plaza. Additional entry gates, new bathrooms, and additional concession windows will help reduce wait lines and make for an even better guest experience. We hope that you're able to join us for the 2019 Fifth Third Bank Summer Concerts at Meijer Gardens. It's how you know it's summer in West Michigan.
Welcome back to City Connection. In addition to Mayor Rosalind Bliss, we have in the studio, we have Assistant City Manager Doug Matthews, along with Director of Communications Amy Snow Buckner, talking a little bit about communications and community engagement. I wanted to drill down a little further on that. And I believe when Mayor introduced you, Doug, it was also mentioning innovation and a few other areas that you have expertise over that really kind of feed into that community engagement aspect. I wanted to see if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. There's kind of a seamless connection between some of the innovation work and the engagement work, honestly. One of the things that I've been doing over the last 10 years is working with a lot of the startups that are trying to solve the online engagement conundrum. How do you effectively engage online and also be inclusive in the process? And I'm hopeful to be able to continue that work here. But innovation is a broad term in a public organization where you do everything from policing to picking up recycling to communications and everything in between. So for us, it's just as much about establishing the culture of innovation that creates the space and the support and the permission, both for employees to bring forward thoughts and innovations on how we can do work better, but also that the community understands where the front door is if they've got something that they want to talk about that might actually be able to help us improve our services and our processes. So I'm looking forward to continuing to have those conversations with the community and figure out how it looks here in Grand Rapids, because every community has a very unique innovation profile, and I think there's some things very unique about Grand Rapids that I'm looking forward to digging into.
You had mentioned when you were talking earlier a little bit about how Grand Rapids might be a little bit ahead of the game in some ways when you compared it to Austin. What are those areas? And then what do you bring from Austin that you think Grand Rapids is ready to jump on?
Well, I mentioned the social capital. For all of its success, I think that the rapid growth that Austin saw over the 10 years that I was there outpaced the community's capacity to really grapple with it and ask some of the hard questions and establish the organizations and the frameworks by which to have those conversations. So in some ways, while the city was rich in terms of actual capital, so from a budgetary standpoint, was in a pretty good position. What they didn't have that I've found in Grand Rapids is the social capital, the community organizations that are very focused, very well organized, and very interested in being a part of the solutions. Coming from Austin, it was there was an expectation that the city will just solve the problem. You know, if you put enough money towards this or towards that, then well, the city can handle that and they can fix it for us. And that never works because you're talking about deep-rooted community issues that the community really needs to be a part of and needs to have some ownership. And here in Grand Rapids, that already exists, and that's pretty big.
It seems to me here in Grand Rapids too, there's also an eagerness to kind of be engaged. That community engagement aspect is among a citizen group that is eager to be a part. How do you make sure they feel that they're not only giving opportunity to speak, but being heard and then action is taken based on that?
So I think it goes back to what the mayor was saying, that, and actually what Doug said is providing those opportunities, authentic opportunities, right? And not just checking a box and saying we've done community engagement, but really bringing folks in, meeting them where they're at. So not always asking folks to come to City Hall, but going into neighborhoods or where folks are to really genuinely ask them what they think and to provide feedback, and then closing the loop, right? Like inviting them to the table and helping them be part of the decision making too, and not necessarily just saying, oh, thanks for your feedback, but being part of the decisions that are being made as well, I think is critically important.
With that authenticity being key, I can think of what's been going on for a little while now is the commission meetings out in the neighborhoods, in the wards. What are some other initiatives like that you see coming?
So I think it's really our community engagement opportunities that we have. We've done community engagement well in pockets of our organization, but really bringing that all together and creating a playbook for the organization and identifying other opportunities and asking our community partners to help us identify those opportunities in those spaces where maybe we're not getting into, but we need to. So making sure everybody's a part of that conversation is really important.
Okay.
I think we're seeing some of this in some of the work that we're doing around Southtown and some of the ASPs, but also we've been talking about this with the census as well. And that is to bring people on as neighborhood ambassadors. So in the budget, one of the elements of the budget is we have some funds allocated for the 2020 census, which is coming up next year. It's a very important process. We want to make sure that everyone is counted. And within that, the plan is to have funds so that we can hire people from the neighborhood to work with us, to do the education, to do the outreach, and to help us prepare, but also to help people get out and make sure that they're counted come April 1st of next year. So I think it, that's a very different process than we used 10 years ago when we did the 2010 census. Our plan, I think, is much more neighborhood focused, and I think it involves a lot more community engagement.
Definitely some concerns around the current census period of time of some fears and some mistrust there when it's neighbor to neighbor then is the method you're looking at then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and that goes to the trust aspect of engagement. And I think we need to be practical as a public organization that we're not always going to be the trusted authority in the room. And there are times where we have to hand that over to the person, to the organization that is. We are representatives of the public, therefore the public is part of what it is that we do. It's not an either-or proposition, and sometimes the most effective engagement is giving up control of the engagement itself, and making sure that people feel comfortable providing their feedback in a safe environment.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the kind of the dialogue between the two of you, simply because you're a native and you're new to town, and just the two different perspectives coming together. How's that work?
I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think it's been fun. No, I have already learned a lot from Doug in terms of, obviously the city of Austin as an organization is bigger than the organization we have here, but there are a lot of really great best practices that he has brought with him. But as Doug will say, he and the city manager are not trying to make Grand Rapids Austin. Like, we are our own city with our own identity. And so I think that for me personally, that was really refreshing to hear, because we have so many great things already happening in our city. But it's just really, it's nice to have folks who are new to the city, to our organization. They bring a fresh perspective. They bring for everything. And then from a communications, community engagement perspective, it's been great.
Amy has been happy to have somebody in the organization that speaks the same language,
Yes.
who's experienced some of the same pain. You know, I did come from a communications background. I did that with 3 cities before I came here. So sometimes it's just helpful to know that the pain is shared, and that honestly, most of the challenges that you have in the public sector aren't unique. It might be scope and scale, and it might have a little bit of a different personality, but I've worked in communities of 70,000, 110,000, a million, and now 200,000, and a lot of the challenges are the same. What we have an opportunity to do is to take all of our collective learning and apply it to right here, right now, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah. One thing I've appreciated about being able to work with our city manager and now with assistant city manager is just having somebody ask the question of, why do we do it this way? And do we need to continue to do it this way? You know, there is value in having somebody that has a different perspective, but also significant amount of experience in other cities that can come to the table and say, you know what, there are better ways or different ways to do this, or let's think outside the box and really push the envelope more than maybe we have in the past, because we've been so set in doing the same thing that we've always done for so long. To take a step back and really think differently about how do we accomplish something maybe in a more effective way or a different way has been unbelievably refreshing. Yeah.
And we have really talented folks who work at the city, and I think what's exciting for me is that, you know, we always look to other cities for best practices, and we are, I believe, quickly becoming a city that provides best practices for other cities. So we're becoming a model to other cities. So I think that's very exciting.
Yeah. Let's take one of those challenging topics and see how you've worked through it in recent weeks. You're a whole, 2 months almost now, Doug? So it's time to ask. Community and police relations. It's a difficult one. How is that? How does that process work within the office and when you relate out to the community?
You want me to?
By all means.
I'm gonna take a step back, and I'll probably be a little esoteric about this, but then we'll drill down. You know, I mentioned when we were talking earlier, the part of the reason that I feel like I'm here is the cultural change piece, and a big part of that cultural change is reliant upon the leadership of the organization. As folks know, we don't have a permanent police chief right now, which means that there's a lot of things that we would like to do, that I would like to do, that it's just not my place to, not only is it not my place to do, but I wouldn't be successful trying to do it because of the way that police departments are structured. My dad was chief of police for 18 years. I know it well. But we need to get a new chief in place. So that's why so much attention has been placed on getting that piece right. In the interim, I think some of the conversations that the Commission's been having, specifically around the budget, around some of the studies that have come out, around how the department should be organized to best do the work, is the first step. Because when you're talking about cultural change, if you don't create the space where folks feel safe doing it, and you don't create a structure where they understand what they're being asked to do, then you're not going to be successful. And we're kind of in this in-between space right now where we know where we're headed, but we're not there yet. And I know that there's some frustration on the community side because they're ready to see it get moving. And it will. We're setting that that foundation, and really the next step is getting the chief on board so that we can start carrying it forward.
I did hear something from you that's similar for you, and you both have a history of family police chiefs.
My dad was a police officer, not
okay.
a chief, for 30 years. Yes, yes.
So, that's unique in my mind.
Yes.
But yeah, it is the challenge on our plate right now, and it's good to hear a little bit about the process that you're thinking, Doug, and then Amy. This has been something that's come up many times in recent months. That has to be. You've had to address that and handle that in these recent weeks.
And so obviously in my role I work very closely with our police department. We have a PIO, a public information officer within our police department, as with our fire department. You know, it is, that is one of those things that, you know, like it pulls at me, right? Just like it pulls at all of us. And we need strong community police relations. Our police department needs our community, and our community needs our police department. And that relationship has to be strong for us to be a vibrant, sustainable city. Like that's non-negotiable. And so we have had situations, and we work through them, and I really truly believe that we come out stronger each time. It may not feel like it, and it's tough, but you know what? We have to continue to have those tough conversations, and I really believe that we will come to a point, hopefully under the direction of a new police chief, where we will see significant change in the relationship between our community and our police department.
Good. Very good way to wrap up this segment. Mayor, one thing you wanted to add to
Well,
that?
I'll just add timeline. You know, we're really hopeful, and the city manager leads this process because the police chief reports to the city manager, and the city manager will ultimately be making the decision about who the next chief is. But we're really hopeful that by the end of June that we'll have a new police chief selected. Now they'll probably need time before they start, but our hope is that that will move pretty quickly once we get through the budget. There are a number of processes set up where we'll be hopefully getting the opportunity to meet the finalists for the police chief position.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you to both of you. Amy Snow Buckner, Director of Communications for the city, and then new Assistant City Manager, Doug Matthews. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back after this break.
The Rapidian for the community provides an alternative.
To be the eyes of somebody who's not there.
It's more honest, more authentic, and more true.
And you do have the freedom to talk about things because they're things that need to be talked about, not because they'll get readers or viewers or clicks.
Sometimes it feels intimidating to write a news story or to write a story about a community issue. What I love about the Rapidian is that they make it really simple and easy.
So it's not like you have to meet this deadline by this time.
I'll be eating a sandwich in one hand and then I'm like typing in the other.
I love the freedom to be able to write from wherever.
I think it's a really powerful experience when people are able to tell their story and to be heard.
Anyone can have a voice.
Anybody can speak.
It's a platform for the community to tell its own story in a very authentic way, and that's powerful.
A community has to be involved in order for it to be sustainable. And so it tells you something about our community.
Welcome back to City Connection. Really enjoyed that conversation with Doug Matthews of City. He's the Assistant City Manager, new position there, and Amy Snow Buckner is Director of Communications. We actually got into a little bit about the police chief search, and you mentioned that you're looking for somebody to maybe be selected by end of June, and if I understood a conversation I had with another city commissioner recently, there were maybe 35 pretty solid candidates recently, so that's got to be a little bit hopeful.
Yes, yes. So we're working with a firm, and of course, we're not actively involved because it's not a city commission decision, but we're told that it's a really strong pool of candidates, and our city manager will work with the firm to vet those candidates and then bring forward the finalists. So I am feeling hopeful. And let me add a little more detail, speaking of the police department, and I know the assistant city manager touched on this, but in the proposed budget, there are additional resources for the police department. And they include, and it's based on some of the results of the deployment study that came out about a month ago. But within the proposed budget, there is the proposal to add additional community police officers, to add additional civilians to free up officers, because that was one of the findings of the deployment study, is that you have a lot of officers doing kind of administrative and clerical work that could and really should be done by civilians. And then to add 2 crime analysts. So the deployment study made it clear that our detectives unit really needs additional crime analysts. We only have 1 right now for a department our size. We really should have 3. So the addition of those 2. The city manager is proposing to add a behavioral and crisis specialist, an individual that can work both with victims as well as officers who may experience traumatic incidents when they're working, and then also to add a police liaison that would actually work within the city manager's office and be a liaison to the community and work with community, particularly around community and police relations. So I know over the last several years we've talked at length, and the police chief has asked a number of times to add staff, and we said we weren't prepared to do that until we had a good analysis of our current staffing model. And so with that deployment study being done in the proposed budget, there are additional positions added.
Okay, and they're very specifically solving particular problems then, not just numbers of bodies, numbers of head counts, but very good, understandable on that.
Yeah, and related to public safety, there's also a position in the fire department looking at emergency preparedness, knowing that, in light of a number of potential tragedies or crises, we need to make sure that we're prepared for that. And so that also is being added just to make sure that we're prepared.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, a few more topics that you and I wanted to get to before we were done, and it's as we approach the 50th anniversary of Calder.
Yes.
Tell a little bit about an author you heard today.
Yeah, so I thank you for bringing that up. So today at lunch, I was at the Econ Club lunch, and we had a speaker named Jed Pearl, who is an author, historian, expert on Alexander Calder. And so he gave this beautiful speech with a lot of pictures and images talking about the life and legacy of Alexander Calder, but also how Grand Rapids was really instrumental in Alexander Calder's career, but also how La Grande Vitesse really sparked additional public art for Calder in the United States. He had done installations in other countries, but this was one of his paramount pieces of public art installation in the United States. And it was a really interesting conversation in light of this year in June 14th will be the 50th anniversary of the installation of La Grande Vitesse. And so Festival of the Arts this year, the first weekend in June, will be having a number of celebrations in honor of the 50th anniversary. They'll actually take a look back at the history of the Calder. But I can tell you, I walked out of our luncheon feeling very proud of the mark that we have made on the public art world. And really the impact on Alexander Calder's life. And one thing I learned is that we are the only city that has a rooftop Alexander Calder. So if you haven't seen that or you don't know about it, on the roof of the county building is a beautiful Alexander Calder painting that complements La Grande Vitesse. and it's absolutely stunning.
I wish we had a slide of that we
I
could
know.
show.
It's
I did
beautiful.
not know about that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
All right.
Yeah.
We're going to jump back because we do have actually a question that comes from when Amy and Doug were here, and it has to do with police chief and selection in the police department. And it's a broad question, and in some ways you've been trying to address it with what you've been saying, but this is what it says. It said, how are we going to deal with the blatant racism and lack of professionalism at GRPD? And that's a little bit of the process you're speaking to, I think, that.
Yeah, well, and the city manager is also has talked at length about that as well, and that it really, some of the issues that have that incidents, I should say, that have occurred, from the city commission, but also the city manager's perspective, is we really need to take a fresh look at our training, our protocols, but also we really need to be mindful as we make a selection for a police chief that they fully appreciate the needs that we have in our community, and that they are equipped and up to addressing them and working really with community, building those relationships, and that's really key. How do we build relationships and make sure that there's a level of trust, and that takes time, and we have been working on it for a number of years, knowing that it doesn't feel like we're moving fast enough, but we know that it's a top priority.
Okay.
So.
And I'm sorry to jump back and forth because it takes
No,
us a
that's
little bit
okay.
off track. But then we were also talking a little bit before we came out of our last break, and it had to do with advancements on the Laker line and then even South Division 2 and some of those things.
Yeah, so let me fill you in. So on Laker Line, so if you're not familiar with what that is the second bus rapid transit line that we will have in our city. It's a partnership between the Rapid and Grand Valley State University. So Grand Valley is putting some funds into that Laker Line. It will go all the way from Allendale campus to downtown up Monroe and connect with the Silver Line. And we're breaking ground on June 3rd. So that will be in construction mode this construction season, hopefully fully operational next year. You'll start to see the parking lots as well as the stations all along Lake Michigan. And it should be a significant addition to our public transit system here in our community. It's a expensive project. We were able to get over $50 million from the federal government for that project, and so it's a significant investment, similar to what the Silver Line was. So we'll have Silver Line. We're also doing through the Rapid, two other things I should share. We're in the process of kind of doing a look at our entire organization, so that will move forward this year. But we're also doing a study on a potential third BRT line, and where is there the density and the need for that.
Do you see expansions in some newer areas?
So what has been talked about is potentially expanding it and going out further on Michigan out to Plymouth and beyond, maybe even to the Beltline, to the park and ride, or to go north. As we know, we have a lot of traffic going north and south, so going north of the city, Plainfield, Rockford, up that way.
Okay.
So yeah, stay tuned.
Great.
Good stuff. Oh, division. I should tell you about division. So in the budget, there's a couple things related to division. So we passed and supported the vision for Division Avenue, which is really quite comprehensive and was driven by community, and it has a lot of hopes for the Division Avenue, but two that we're moving forward. One is you'll be seeing new lighting and expansion of lighting along Division. That has been in the works, and it'll commence this year. And then we're also working with some community partners and identifying where we can add public restrooms, which has also been a priority of the neighborhood for a long time. And so hopefully we'll have that in place this year. And then we're looking at our bus stops, and we'll be doing some investments in those in the city.
Great, Mayor Bliss, great to catch up. Lots of information. As usual, we'll be back on June 4th, and this does wrap up May's edition of City Connection here on GRTV Live Wire Channel 24.